Welcome back to Climate Plus, Purpose and Prosperity in an Unprecedented World. So the technology landscape is evolving and expanding at an incredibly rapid pace. And artificial intelligence is clearly right there in the middle of all of it, but also robotics. And the intersection between AI and robotics is a really interesting one. My guest today, Makoto Kern, is innovating at the cutting edge of this challenge at his company, 𝘃𝗵𝗆ct Inc., and that's impact with 3 I's at the beginning. Welcome to the podcast, Makoto.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Lincoln. Excited to be here.
Great. So let's start with the basics. Could you frame the technology landscape for us? I'm thinking of AI, then, which people might be a little bit more familiar with, or at least heard more about, and then the adjacent technologies like robotics.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of like a perfect storm that's happening right now with the AI acceleration, kind of the robotics maturation. I think obviously you're covering climate, and I think the climate urgency and all that is also, I think a lot of that is converging. And I think kind of what's fascinating is that the user experience, obviously I might be a little bit biased because we focus on user experience with our agency, but it's always been like anytime there's like a technological advance, just like the .com boom era, what came out was really, Apple came out the winner, Google Chrome came out the winner from all the different browsers. And I think, with the kind of this catalyst, it's really the user experience at the forefront of whatever's in front of the user. They don't really care what's happening in the back end, but what's really happening that I feel is that the AI capabilities right now, it's really accelerating time to market. Whether you're trying to launch new robotic facilities, with manufacturing, or you're just trying to launch new software apps, AI is allowing people and companies to launch faster and quicker. And so I'm seeing, from our side, we're seeing it's a double-edged sword when you have that. Of course, people are going to look for shortcuts. People are going to look for ways in which where we can we cut in order to launch, product A much faster. And so I think this is where it could be great as a force multiplier, but you still have to have that expertise to check because AI still makes mistakes. Even if you have like a 5% error, if that error is being propagated throughout a company, you may have, you have to have something to catch that. It's privacy issues, security issues. You always have to be aware of that, especially if you're developing something in that handles privacy and data. And so, I think with robotics as well, when I was doing robotics way back when, obviously the processing power has increased exponentially. And I was studying neural networks and algorithms, and just to see kind of where things are going. I mean, from, you've got the kind of the self-driving cars, obviously is the big thing right now that we're seeing in real time, really accelerating and doing well. And how they're being used is also, a big thing where you've got LIDAR and vision, or just vision, with Tesla and Waymo and 𝘃𝗵𝗵𝗶. But with also humanoid robots as well, and how they're also accelerating, how they're getting cheaper, how they're actually mimicking humans, and how they're putting things together from Boston, Dynamics to Optimus and all that. And it's such a fascinating time to be in right now, and how fast things are accelerating.
I want to grab one thing you said in particular, and that is the concept of an electric vehicle, a self-driving electric vehicle, as a robot. And I'm not sure, maybe it's just me, but I'm not sure that a lot of people actually make that connection. They think of it as a car that does extra stuff,
Yep.
as opposed to a robot that has the functions of a car.
Yeah, I think it's definitely more than just cruise control on steroids.
Yeah.
There's so much that's happening. And I think, one of the fascinating things, because I was following the Tesla self-driving very close. I mean, one of my projects back in school in my robotics classes, I remember I had to put together kind of an entire ecosystem of how, if you're going to launch a self-driving automobile company, how would you do it? Obviously, I'm not, I haven't launched it yet, so I'm not there, but I think, yeah, I mean, just to think about, I just remember especially like Stanford and all these big schools where they had the competition where you had to drive, the self-driving car would just drive. It would go through all these different environments through the desert and everything. And they would have the race to see who would get to the end. It was such a cool thing to watch, and just understanding that. And that was like 20 some years ago. And then now what we have, I mean, it's an amazing thing to see. I was following Tesla very closely as far as like understanding their algorithms and what was the big leap between the initial full self-driving until I think it was like version 13, and how they were training the algorithms. And there's such a chaotic environment when you're training these things and trying to anticipate every single thing that can happen. It's infinite. And so I know that they did something with their algorithms where it learned exactly or mimics how everybody else drives. And it's taking all that information, and they're getting millions of hours of data. And to train it on that, it was able to really accelerate or take that extra leap to be able to maneuver through any type of different chaotic environment. And I think that's what a lot of robotics have turned to now. Instead of having to understand, really complex mathematics or how to do the different types of I guess robotic programming, you're just basically mimicking what it needs to do and how to do it. Because one of the companies that we actually work with, they were one of the world leaders in robotics, and they were losing market share to another company that can do maybe a quarter of the features that they had. But this kind of gets back into the user experience where most people, what is the pain point? It's like setting up manufacturing cells as quickly and easily as possible without a big learning curve. And this other company, they were able to really hone in on just the user experience, making it really quick to set up, easy to use and program quickly. And so we were, our actually project was to task that into making their interface much easier to utilize and then set up for the robotics. So it's, I mean, back to your original question of the self-driving cars and people thinking that it's an actual robot. I mean, it's processing all these different things from a vision system standpoint. I mean, just whether you're using LIDAR or a combination of LIDAR and just vision, the amount of processing that's happening and trying to understand what's in front of you in real time on multiple different cameras. I mean, that takes more than just cruise control on steroids.
Yeah. Yeah. So could you walk us through a little bit, just at a high level, of the evolution of those robotic capabilities in automobiles, and where I'm thinking of the Waymo taxi cabs that you see all over the Bay Area where I live. What was the tipping point? Was it a robotics tipping point? Was it an AI tipping point? Was it, I mean, obviously there's a big customer, public acceptance, public safety tipping point. How did we finally get to pulling up to a stoplight and looking to the right and seeing a car with nobody in it, which still freaks me out?
Yeah, when it comes to that evolution, I mean, obviously, as car companies were building out cars, I think the cruise control got, a slightly bit more, slightly bit better. And I can just, I can see from some of the cars that I drove initially, you have just cruise control, which just moderates the speed. But then you start adding sensors like, oh, you're coming close to a car in front of you, so slow down. And it automatically detects that. Or if you're moving out of the lane, it starts to alert you about those things. And I think just from, again, back to that whole like self-driving like competition that the universities were having between each other, they all were utilizing similar type of sensors. So they knew that there was something there. Like, obviously, as humans, we drive using vision. We don't necessarily use lasers per se, but we have a great vision system in front of us that we kind of use fuzzy logic to break down without having to know the actual mathematics of like, slow down a little bit, speed up faster, turn right or left, a hard right, slough left, that kind of thing. And I think as companies, and I can't recall exactly like who started doing more. I know Google was pretty far ahead with that, with some of their cars. And in Austin, Texas, they had almost like what Amazon has now with the Zoox, and it would drive around itself with tons of sensors. And there's also hybrid systems out there too, that where somebody's actually driving and controlling it, but there's nobody in there. So I think, it's kind of started with that whole, and I think it was like DARPA who started all those challenges. DARPA is always at the forefront of all these kind of like cutting edge technologies and getting these competitions going. But I
Yeah.
think they're the ones who started that. And I know Carnegie Mellon and Stanford were always like the big winners. And so I'm sure Boston Dynamics, they probably had their say in some of that too. But I just remember that like Google's robotic cars were doing really well, and I think they're the ones that really started pushing that. And obviously, now that we have like Uber and Lyft, they took out basically the taxi cab companies.
Yeah.
It was also that, as car companies and automotive manufacturers and obviously Tesla, where they're trying to say, well, hey, this is a big market. If we can cut out the actual human that's driving, there's, in the future, we can definitely start to have less and less car accidents, don't have to worry about distracted drivers, things like that. And I think knowing that that's potentially the blue sky idea of having no accidents or limited accidents, that's really
Yeah.
what's driving this. And knowing that there's a big market, and also knowing that cars are expensive, insurance is expensive. And if we can have somehow, way in which we don't have to touch a steering wheel, we don't have to be on a train to get to our destination, but we can actually be in a self-driving car that gets us there, and we can work while we do that. I think all these
Yeah.
things kind of help push the idea of like, let's keep accelerating this technology.
Yeah. So safety, efficiency, productivity.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about, you're a user experience specialist. How do you design a the user experience for the passengers of the car? Because there's so much. I'm thinking of some of my relatives who would be on and off the gas. You don't want to be riding the brake. You don't want to be on and off the
Yeah.
gas. You don't want to jerk the steering wheel around. How do you design a user experience that not only does things safely and efficiently, but does things in a way that is comfortable for the user in terms of not that it's driven, but the way it's driven?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, just with like anything, it's always good to, as user experience, when we're trying to understand like what are the pain points of users when they're trying to interface with the application, what is the workflow? And so that user research is really important to kind of do up front, and to understand, okay, if we're going to develop and put a lot of money and time into this, what are the kind of things that we want to understand? And I think, obviously with something that's, you're in a vehicle and 5,000 pound car,
Mm,
that trust in like, hey, are you going to get me there safely? Is there going to be an accident? Is there a way for me to override things? I think, those kind of worrisome type of things are like, should be top of mind, obviously, because it is a
yeah,
safety thing. If you're just going to buy something online, you're not so much concerned about that. But if you're driving something that is potentially a safety hazard, then yeah, you want that at top of mind, and ways to kind of correct errors if they do happen. And I think also you want simplicity too. When you're designing anything that's like new for people, you don't want to make it complex to try to figure it out. All these embedded menu systems, you've got to find things. You want to be super simple, almost, I mean, basically frictionless. And it's all intuitive, takes little thought. I mean, the ability to do that seems like it's an easy idea, but it's actually not, because you're trying to make something that is complex very simple. And that's kind of
right.
like our main job. But I think, when you're prioritizing like the safety and trust and all that, I think it's also like, it's accessibility is such a big thing too. This kind of technology can really enable those people that, they're blind, they're physically disabled where they can't get around. But now with this, if you're able to allow this to happen, I mean, that is such a big thing, and where they don't have to rely on somebody else or some very expensive car that's been modified, for their own thing, but you can actually gear a fleet towards, helping those that need it. And that would be, I
Hmm.
mean, I can imagine how cool that would be if, you're blind and you have to walk around, and somebody somebody says, hey, just you could call up some kind of robo taxi or Waymo or whatever, and it could pick you up and take you wherever you can go. You could talk to it.
Yeah.
There's no like physical interface by you just speaking out and doing that. I think those kind of things would really that's part of the whole user experience and thinking about those things. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of
Well,
the things we would do.
I can see it too from a climate perspective, where you could be you could have, and perhaps this exists already. I haven't been in too many. Actually, I haven't yet been in an autonomous car. I have to do that.
Uh,
Solving for, it's a little bit like Google Maps now. Do you want to get there the quickest? Do you want to get there with the least amount of fuel? Do you want to get there with the least amount of carbon? That sort of optionality. I mean, not only are you providing that sort of service, but you're providing choices or options for people in the way that they impact their environment. And I think that that's particularly important in the US because we are, other than a couple of big cities, we are just not trained people.
mm-hmm.
And yet we want the convenience. We need to get to different places. We want to be able to work or sleep or, casually talk on the phone while we're doing that. But we want to find a way to do that, maybe not with train level efficiency, but something a lot closer to it. And I wonder if there are ways that we can really leverage that. And that is a wildly open-ended statement. I'm just curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, with some of the companies that we help with, they work in both renewables and oil and gas. And one of the biggest things is that any kind of interface we develop, there's going to be different users that are using it. And let's say one of the apps that we developed or helped design, there's somebody that has to go to these like 50 oil fields and they have to do maintenance on it and trying to understand which is the best route, what's having the best problems. This is where AI can actually help them figure this out based on where things are at. It's like, okay, where am I at now? Which one should I go to next? What is a priority? What's not going to blow up or cause like a huge safety issue? What's just a minor thing? These are things and routes that you could really help somebody who's out in the field day in and day out, who's not sitting there trying to calculate this thing, but an AI can actually help make their job so much more efficient and actually improve the lives of everybody around him that he's trying to do these things for. Because no matter, some of these oil wells or whatever can be very old and they need the maintenance, and it's really imperative that you get to it. And then you've got somebody who's in a car, maybe connection's not too bad or it's not too great, and they're wearing gloves, whatever the case is. You want to be able to monitor, be able for them to interface with something that is not, where it's like built in a simulated environment. You're at home, it's nice and air conditioned, you got high-speed internet, it's working great. But you've got this nice big screen TV or monitor, and you're trying to play with this app. It's not the actual environment. So really trying to understand who's using it, how they're using it in an environment, and then leveraging that AI in order to make their jobs far more efficient. I think these are things where you can really like accelerate whether, whatever technology or energy you're trying to improve. I think that's where it could benefit.
Yeah. And let me ask you about cellular coverage, because I've got a lot of urban assumptions. I'm an urban suburban person, but when you get out in in the middle of the country, you get out in places where there's simply nothing for miles. I always think of that as the electrification challenge, as access to charging infrastructure and range, in the range of the vehicle. But how much of it is dependent on cellular coverage and the ability to seamlessly or near seamlessly communicate, like, over the airwaves?
Yeah. So this is where there's a multitude of kind of solutions that are being developed as far as like, Starlink. I use that in the middle of nowhere. And I mean, it's pretty amazing. Just a mini dish and it connects to the internet almost anywhere. But if you don't have that available, or it's just, thunderstorm or whatever, and you can't get access to satellites, then we've actually been in those situations where we have to work with the development team to understand, like, hey, let's develop the interface so it doesn't have to be connected to the cloud or anything like that. It can run on its own based on like the laptop or the iPad or whatever it's resident on. And then when you do get signal solution or get a signal, then it's going to upload, it's going to start to sync up the data, and then you can start doing other things that are necessary. But for you to finish your job and to get things done, then you should have it all self-reliant within that, device that you're working on. So you have to really think about, okay, what's the data that can reside there on the laptop or iPhone or whatever it is you're using, or and what's the data that we don't need to sync up with in real time, and we could do that later. So just another thing as a UX designer that you have to take in consideration, especially if it's in like more of those type of environments.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's fascinating, because I think one of the things we need to do, obviously, is get the solutions beyond the cities.
Mm-hmm.
And get the benefits beyond the cities. I think especially where people tend to drive very long distances, to a grocery store or to an airport or what have you. So anyway, so let's go a bit broader. We've talked about the electric car, the autonomous electric car, as a robot that does car things.
Mm-hmm.
What other applications are like that we should be thinking about, where something that we've been doing one way for 50 years, 100 years is really being overhauled by technology, and really thinking about, like the car, thinking about it as a robot as opposed to a car that does more things?
I think the easy answer is anything that is like massive, like data processing, or kind of anything that takes a lot of like big data, and try to figure that out. I mean, that's obviously like accounting, any type of like knowledge work or something like that. I think that's where it's going to be replaced. That's the stuff that's being replaced the quickest. I know I've got friends that are, they own law firms, and they have their legal paralegals. I mean, to be able to do document reviews and things like that so much quicker is so fast. And just like entry level accounting, I think those are things that are really important, but it's something that AI is replacing very quickly. Again, it's processing large amounts of data in a record time.
Mm.
I think any type of market research analysis, those are kind of things that, again, you can just do. I mean, that's what I use mine for a lot of things, is that kind of market research and going out. And it's like, essentially Google on steroids, where it's doing things for you and doing the research and coming up with like, full on kind of like ideas and solutions, which is great to get you started. But I think, also you're seeing it with podcasting, graphic design, basic video editing, things like that. And now with like Google Nano Banana and VO and some of these other things, I mean, the image manipulation and video manipulation, I mean, it's fascinating. You show it a picture and all of a sudden it's just fully animated and doing all these things. It's like, wow, it's pretty amazing that's happening very quickly. And you've got AI avatars and that look pretty human. And I'm sure that's just going to only get better as we get farther and farther along with it. I think as far as like physical labor, that's, I think, potentially maybe kind of the next wave, as we're getting back into the whole robotics, as robotics become more and more, just they become better, more powerful, just more and more of this research of the humanoid robots are, running around and probably working on some kind of massive neural net so they can work it all in conjunction together. I mean, that's something that could be like the next wave that's coming in. And that's obviously all manufacturing, warehouse operations, things like that, that are probably going to be disrupted. So, yeah.
So a lot of legacy tools, a lot of legacy appliances that make that jump from legacy appliance that does more things to robot that does the things that the legacy appliance used to do, except autonomously.
For sure. I think what would be interesting too, because obviously you being, professor, it's the whole AI in universities and schools, and trying to understand, like, okay, do you embrace it? Do you push it aside so kids and students don't get so dependent on it? Or you do have them work together and figure out a way in which you do leverage it? And so that way, when they, the biggest thing I'm hearing now is that college graduates are having trouble finding jobs. And people I know in private equity, and they're basically saying, like, yeah, we all the entry level jobs are pretty much right now are being all taken care of by AI. And it's a
Mm.
scary proposition because I have kids too, and we're trying to figure out what should they get into and what subjects should they study, how, what should they stay in, should they get into trades or should they actually go to university now, especially with the price of a university and you're not guaranteed to get a job. And just hearing like how tough it is, it's such an interesting point where yeah, we had actually a teacher on our podcast and we had this discussion, and he teaches special ed in high school, and just trying to figure out, like, how do you implement AI without where the kids are using it as a leverage tool versus like another, like a computer or a calculator, versus trying to say, oh no, we don't want it at all right now because it's going to kill creativity or it's going to kill critical thinking. But I think there's a good balance that we have to figure that out.
It sounds like there's got to be a stage in the education process where you actually have to show your work.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to a point where, in a math class, the calculator is okay to use.
Yeah.
But you've got to go through that manual process to actually
Yeah.
understand how it works before you get there. Yeah, no, it's a fascinating conundrum. The theory that I have, at least, and maybe this is already
Mm-hmm.
superseded by 1,000 other things, but that AI is going to be the most effective in being accepted and being a productive member of society, so to speak, when it takes that co-pilot role,
Mm-hmm.
where it takes that helper role and allows the human beings not to do the drudgery, not to do the stuff that the kind of pencil pushing stuff, but allows the human beings to leverage their own expertise in new ways and become, frankly, even more valuable as
Yeah.
humans because they have this tool that allows them, that's giving them this co-pilot, this assistance. But it begs the question of how do you create those experts in the first place if those entry level jobs are disappearing because of AI? So, clearly, that's a whole can of worms, but we're
Oh, yeah.
we're clearly at a really interesting inflection point as a species. And I
Mm-hmm.
think no one person is going to figure this out. We're going to have to see how it goes, as we go along.
Yeah.
So with that, let me jump to my lightning round questions.
Okay.
So 3 questions I always ask. There's the opportunity question, the bulldozer question, and the spotlight question. The
Mm-hmm.
first is the opportunity question. If you had $1 million or some big sum of money to invest in the solutions and the challenges, solving the challenges that we've been talking about, where would you put that money?
$1 million. That doesn't get us too far nowadays.
Right, right. Some big sum of money.
I think from a, kind of like a human centered design standpoint, I feel like that's still so important. Yeah, we're getting into
Mm.
AI. It's more technical, but it's just like, again, like I brought up in the .com boom and bust days, where what comes out ahead and what comes out at the end is whatever is the best for the users that are using it. And I think anything that allows whatever new tech, whether it's like, from EVs to, anything with climate, solar installations, making it more efficient, understanding your electricity, how it's being used, what are better ways and more efficient ways, just being able to adapt to that technology and making it much more easier. I think that's a good portion of where I would love to kind of put that money. and
Mhm.
and I think also leveraging AI and trying to find out, like, are we doing the most efficient way possible for whatever systems we're trying to get into, and whether that is climate or energy or something else. Are we creating the best possible like kind of interfaces, or are we creating the best possible things that really are an enjoyable thing to work with? You know, most of the time we don't like interfacing with like enterprise software or whatever, so boring or whatever. But let's create something that really helps make that an enjoyable thing, and let people appreciate what's in front of them. And yeah, and then maybe a third portion of that is like the training programs around it. Get people to understand, and so you can kind of bridge that gap and let people learn and understand kind of like, you know, what this is all about.
Yeah. Yeah. So the bulldozer question is kind of the flip side of that. If you could get one, if you had a giant metaphysical bulldozer and you could get rid of one obstacle in the way of all this, one barrier, one hurdle, what would you bulldoze over?
I think the one thing I hate is the lawsuit nature of our country. Like anytime anything new comes in, if there's somebody who has money behind it, there's always seems to be, you know, somebody waiting on the wayside, on the sidelines, say, "Hey, how can we make money? How can we sue them?" And it really hinders, and it slows down the ability to put out that technology and to test it out. And I feel like that's something that I wish, if we can get away. I mean, you got to protect people. Obviously, you got to make sure there's nothing that's being damaged or safety and all that stuff. But if somebody's grossly negligent, I get it. You need to have that. But there's that pendulum that's, you know, can swing both ways. So you don't want to get to a point where it's just, you know, it's a money grab.
Yeah.
Oh, they're trying self-driving cars. Oh, it hit somebody. Okay, forget it. Let's just get rid of all of it. We're not going to release any more new stuff for another year. That, you know, those are the kind of things that scare me, especially with like that kind of technology.
Yeah. Yeah. So the last question is the spotlight question. If you had a giant spotlight that you could shine on some aspect of all this that is underappreciated, undervalued, underknown about, where would you direct the world's attention?
I think, you know, again, obviously me being in UX, I think if you can kind of, I think we undervalue design. And maybe that's from my perspective, from talking to or having clients or from an executive side. I think, you know, they value design somewhat or to a certain point, but it's almost like an afterthought. They just want the tech there. And I really want them to understand, like, hey, there's so much that's important to the design of how you do things. And if we're able to put that spotlight and show that's not just a commodity or an afterthought, but it's actually very important. I mean, this is kind of where, you know, Steve Jobs is why he made Apple is because he had such a hyper focus on the user experience, and why Apple, you know, have become their powerhouse because of the fact they've not only thought about the product itself, but everything around that product, from how it's shipped, how it's packaged, to everything. So understand, when you get somebody like that who understands how important that is from beginning to end, the user experience, I think that's where, if you can do that through whatever other tech, that's going to be something I would love to point that spotlight towards.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So thank you so much for being on the program. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And yeah, this has been great.
Good. Well, if you'd like to learn more about Makoto and Impact, check out impact.co. That's IIImpact.co.
It's actually
I hope I messed that up. Okay, I stand corrected. Can't get through one of these without messing something up. So I hope you'll join us again for the next episode, another set of challenges, opportunities, and solutions in our unprecedented Climate Plus world. In the meantime, you can find the podcast at climatepluspod.com, pretty much wherever fine podcasts are streaming, including YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Buzzsprout, and on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an interview. Also, I would really appreciate likes, comments, follows, and of course, reposting and sharing this podcast with anyone who might enjoy it. It is a great way to grow the Climate Plus audience. You can provide feedback to me directly through the podcast website or by emailing me at leb@𝘂𝗵𝗁𝗂_podcast. Yes, different from the website, sorry. leb@𝘂𝗵𝗁𝗂_podcast.com. Climate Plus is hosted by me, Lincoln Blevins, and comes to you from beautiful Half Moon Bay, California, just over the hill from Stanford University in Silicon Valley. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on Climate Plus.